Hello dear students, welcome to massive online open course on plant systematics. In this lecture, being an introductory lecture, our topic is Introduction to Plant Systematics. In this lecture, first of all, we will be having a historical perspective, that too brief, of plant systematics. Then we will highlight the various principles of plant systematics, followed by the various components of plant systematics. This will be followed by highlighting the different phases of plant systematics, and lastly we will highlight the contribution of plant systematics to biology in particular and human society in general. Let us start with the first, that is historical perspective to plant systematics. If we see the term systematics, its first use can be traced Corylus Linnaeus way back in 1751, when he introduced the term as systematic botany. Since then, the term systematics has persisted to the present day, although in a completely modified form. It is very important here to introduce one more term, that is taxonomy. In fact, it was the Swiss botanist de Candolle in the year 1813 who coined the term taxonomy. At that time, he referred taxonomy as the theory of plant classification. And later on, it was used mostly for the principles and methods of classification of any group of organisms. And it is still used in this way in the current time. Thus, we can say the term systematics has preceded that of taxonomy. In fact, until the publication of Theory of Evolution by Charles Darwin in the year 1859, the two terms systematics and taxonomy, they were regarded almost synonymous with each other. However, since Darwin's time, systematicists have not only continued their interest in classification, but they have also attempted to understand the evolutionary relationships among the various groups which are arranged. Furthermore, some of the systematicists have become more interested in the process of evolution itself, that is, in exploring the mechanisms which produce the huge diversity. Therefore, a systematist today investigates many aspects of evolutionary biology that go much beyond the morphological investigations a century ago. Because of the diverse nature of studies spawned by evolutionary theory, a collective term systematics is more often used to designate a much broader discipline than the traditional taxonomy. The most commonly used definition for systematics is that of Simpson in the year 1961, who defined it as the scientific study of the kinds and diversity of organisms and of any and all the relationships among them. Later on, much simpler definitions were given by Mayer in 1969, who defined systematics as the study of diversity of organisms, and Wilson in 1985, he simply defined systematics as the study of biological diversity. With this historical background about the term systematics and how it is presently defined as, now let us discuss the various principles of systematics. Stussy in the year 2006, he put forth 6 major principles for the discipline of systematics. These principles are as: number 1, all known life originated on Earth during the past 3.5 billion years. Number 2nd principle, due to evolutionary processes, that is speciation, hybridization, extinction, the various life forms, they show natural patterns of relationships to each other. The 3rd principle, using selected features of organisms, that is characters and character states, it is possible to determine the patterns of relationships that reflect the evolutionary relationships. 4th principle, humans need hierarchical systems of information storage and also information retrieval in order to live, survive, including our dealings with the living world. The 5th principle, patterns of relationships are used to construct hierarchical classifications of coordinate and subordinate groups that are information rich and have high predictive value. The sixth principle, the names are assigned to the classified groups in order to facilitate communication about them. Now, let us discuss the basic components of plant systematics. Various systematic activities are directed towards the main goal of constructing an ideal system of classification that necessitates the procedures of identification, description, nomenclature, and constructing the relationships. This enables a better management of information in order to be used by different workers, and also investigation about different aspects. Not only this, but also structure and functioning of different life forms. All these activities can be regarded as basic components of systematics. If we have to separately discuss them, we can summarize them like this, starting with the description. The description of a taxon involves listing its features by recording the appropriate character states. A shortened, a brief description consists of only those taxonomic characters which help in separating a taxon from other closely related taxa, and it forms the diagnosis. And the characters are termed as diagnostic characters. These diagnostic characters for a taxon simply determine its circumscription. The description is recorded in a set pattern like habit, stem, leaves, flowers, sepals, petals, stamens, carpels, fruits. For each character, an appropriate character state is listed. For example, flower color, it is in character, it may be red, yellow, white, and other colors. And these colors are called as flower color states. The description is recorded in a semi-technical language using specific terms for each of these character states, which enables a proper documentation of data. The second main activity in plant systematics is nomenclature. Nomenclature basically deals with the determination of a correct name of a taxon. There are different sets of rules for different groups of organisms. Nomenclature of plants, including algae and fungi, is governed by International Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungi and Plants, briefly abbreviated as ICN, through its various rules and recommendations. This ICN is updated every 6 years, and the code helps in picking up a single correct name out of the numerous scientific names which are available for a taxon, with a particular circumscription, position and rank. To avoid inconvenience, name changes for certain taxa, a list of conserved names is also provided in the code. On the other hand, cultivated plants are governed by a separate code known as International Code of Nomenclature for Cultivated Plants, abbreviated as ICNCP, which is slightly different from and largely based on ICN. The third basic component of plant systematics is identification. Identification is simply recognizing an unknown specimen with an already known one, and also determining its position in a classification. In practice, if we see, it involves finding a name for an unknown specimen. This may be achieved simply by visiting a herbaria or comparing the unknown specimen with already identified specimens which are stored in the herbaria. Alternatively, we can say the specimen may also be sent to an expert in the field of that particular group of organism who can help in its proper identification. Identification can also be achieved using various types of literature such as floras, monographs or field manuals, and making use of identification keys which are provided in these scientific literature. After the unknown specimen has been provisionally identified with the help of a key, the identification can be further confirmed by comparison with the detailed description of the taxon which is provided in the scientific literature. A method that is nowadays becoming more popular over the recent years involves taking a photograph of the plant and its parts, mostly the diagnostic parts, and then uploading this picture on the website and informing the members of the appropriate electronic lists or news groups who can see the photographs at the website and then send their comments to the uncoverer. Members of the systematic fraternity could thus help each other in identification in a much better way. After discussing this identification as a basic component of plant systematics, the next one is classification. Classification is basically an arrangement of organisms into groups on the basis of similarities and dissimilarities. The groups in turn are assembled into more inclusive groups until all the organisms have been assembled into a single most inclusive group. In sequence of increasing inclusiveness, the groups are assigned to a fixed hierarchy of characters such as species, genus, family, order, class, and division. The final arrangement constitutes a system of classification. In fact, the process of classification includes assigning appropriate position and rank to a new taxon, and dividing a taxon into smaller units, and ultimately uniting two or more taxa into one, transferring its position from one group to another, and altering its rank. Once established, a classification provides an important mechanism of information storage, information retrieval, and its proper usage. This ranked system of classification is popularly known as linear hierarchical system. After discussion on the various components of plant systematics, now let us discuss the phases in plant systematics. Plant systematics, if we see, has made considerable advancements from the earlier one, that is herbarium records, to nowadays the online data banks. The present day systematicists find themselves in different stages of advancement in different parts of the world. For instance, tropical Asia, tropical Africa, they are amongst the richest area of the world in terms of floristic diversity. But they are amongst the poorest as far as the economic resources to pursue complete documentation of this systematic information. On the other side, if we see whole of Europe with numerous rich resources and huge economic resources, have to account for slightly more than 6,000 species of plants. If we see on the other hand only one country, that is India, with meager resources, it has less than 1/10 of the landscape, but has to account for the study of at least 4 times more of the vascular plants than in Europe. Similarly, a small country like Colombia in South America has estimated about 45,000 different species, but only few botanists to study the flora. On the other side, contrastingly, Great Britain has approximately more than 1,400 taxa with thousands of professional and immature botanists available to document this information. Therefore, it is not strange that there is a lot of disparity in the level of advancement concerning knowledge about respective floras. Today, the systematic advancement can be conveniently divided into 4 distinct phases, which are encountered in different parts of the world. If we have to discuss these phases, they start like this. Number first, the exploratory or pioneer phase. This phase makes the beginning of the plant systematics, wherein we collect the specimens and build herbarium records. The few specimens of a species in the herbaria are the only record of its variation. These specimens are, however, useful in the preliminary inventory of flora through discovery, description, naming, and identification of plants. Here, morphology and distribution provide the data on which systematicists must rely. Taxonomic experience and judgment are particularly important in this pioneer phase. Most areas of the tropical Africa and tropical Asia are passing through this phase. The second phase is referred to as consolidation or systematic phase. During this phase, herbarium records are quite ample and the information is available in much better quality regarding the variation that is in the plant systems in different parts of the world. This development phase is helpful in the preparation of floras and monographs. It also facilitates in better understanding of the degree of variation within a taxa. 2 or more herbarium specimens may appear to be sufficiently different and regarded as belonging to 2 different species on the basis of very few available herbarium records. But only a field study of populations involving thousands of specimens can help in reaching at a better understanding of their status. If there are enough field specimens to fill in the gaps in variation pattern, there is no justification in regarding them as separate species. On the other hand, if there are distinct gaps in the variation pattern, it strengthens their separate identity. In fact, many plants described as species on the basis of limited material in pioneer phase, that is the first phase, are found to be simple variants of other species in the second phase, that is the consolidation phase. Most parts of the Central Europe, North America, and in Asia, the developed country like Japan, they are experiencing this phase. Then the third phase in plant systematics is called as experimental or biosystematic phase. During this phase, the herbarium records and the variation studies are almost complete. In addition, information on biosystematics refers to studies on transplant experiments, breeding behavior, cytogenetics. They are also available. The transplant experiments involve collecting seeds, saplings, or other propagules from morphologically distinct populations from different habitats and growing them under common environmental conditions. If the differences between the original populations were purely ecological, the differences would disappear under a common environment, and there is no justification in regarding them as distinct entities. On the other hand, if the differences still persist, these are evidently genetically fixed. If these populations are allowed to grow together for several years, their breeding behavior would further establish their status. If there are complete reproductive barriers between the populations, they will fail to interbreed and maintain their separate identity. These evidently belong then to different species. On the other hand, if there is no reproductive isolation between them, over the years they would interbreed, form intermediate hybrids, which will soon fill the gaps in their variation pattern. Such populations belong to the same species and better distinguished as the terms have been quoted like ecotypes, subspecies, or varieties. Furthermore, the chromosomal studies can throw much light on their affinities and status. At the present time, Central Europe has reached this phase of plant systematics. Fourth phase that we recognize in plant systematics is called as encyclopedic or holotaxonomic phase. In this phase, not only the previous three phases are attained, but information on all botanical fields is also available. This information is assembled, analyzed, and a meaningful synthesis of analysis is provided for understanding the phylogeny. Phylogeny means the evolutionary relationships. The collection of data, analysis, synthesis are the jobs of an independent discipline of systematics, referred to as numerical taxonomy. In fact, if we summarize, the first two phases of systematics are often considered under alpha and beta taxonomy, and the third and fourth phase are referred to as gamma and omega taxonomy. At present, only a few persons are involved in encyclopedic work, that is the holotaxonomic work, and that too in a very few isolated taxonomic groups. It may thus be safe to conclude, though in a few groups omega taxonomy is within reach, for great majority of the plants, especially in tropical Africa and tropical Asia, even the alpha stage has not been crossed. The total integration of available information for the plant kingdom is thus possible for the developed world, but not for the developing world at present. Now lastly, let us now discuss the contribution of systematics to the biology. The contribution of systematics extend not only to the human society in general, but also to the subdisciplines of biology in particular. In fact, one of the most important contributions of systematics is that it serves as the data processing system for biology. As we know, large amount of data is continuously generated about living organisms in different parts of the world. The data thus generated during the course of biological research studies range from morphology to nowadays molecular biology. Most of the data specifically addresses the research questions separately. However, the discipline of plant systematics, it allows the organization of diverse type of data by simply linking it with the organisms that are arranged hierarchically in a classification system. By this way, the isolated data points from different subdisciplines of biology can be organized to address more general research questions in a much better holistic manner. Systematics help us in understanding the process of evolution. The process of microevolution, such as individual variability, variation in populations, reproductive isolation, modes of speciation, all are studied through systematic research. The broad-scale evolutionary processes, also called as macroevolution, are understood through systematic studies. For example, the trends in specialization of flowers in plants and pollinators, seeds and their dispersal agents. These macroevolutionary insights are helpful in other areas of biology such as reproductive biology, developmental biology, etc. The systematic studies also help in unraveling the patterns of evolution. The diverse patterns that result in processes get manifested at different levels of biological organization, which range from local population to higher taxonomic levels. Furthermore, the ancestor-descendant and associated patterns of relationships over long periods of evolutionary time, commonly referred to as phylogeny, are of special interest to systematists. In fact, the phylogeny is important for the systematists because they use it in the construction of classification. The relevance of systematics to other areas of biology such as ecology, biogeography, and other disciplines is so strong and intimate that they are virtually dependent upon the data that is being generated in systematic studies. A proper classification of organisms and accurate knowledge about distribution is crucial to these subdisciplines of biology. It is clearly obvious that to understand the interaction among organisms requires prior knowledge about what they are and also where they are. Systematic studies contribute immensely to the better understanding of biodiversity. Not only its documentation, but its conservation and sustainable use. Systematics also provides the basic tool for documentation of global biodiversity. In fact, today if we see, only 1.7 million species are known to science, although the conservative estimates of global biodiversity is roughly about 12.5 million species. Therefore, it is the systematics that can help in describing the unknown biodiversity before it is being lost forever. Lastly, now let us highlight the importance of systematics to human society. Systematics as a scientific discipline is important in providing a foundation of information about the tremendous diversity of life. In fact, the systematic research is the basis for collecting, cataloging, retrieving, and using information about biodiversity. In the present day world, the systematic studies are important in the conservation of biodiversity because we know as the species disappear, so does their potential to facilitate our future economic needs. Many species which are yet to be discovered will be having enormous value for food, medicine, or other human needs. These are routinely encountered during the course of systematic work. Therefore, systematics is essential for helping to ensure our continued survival on this planet Earth. Systematics, by investigating the phylogeny of groups of organisms, gives insights into other fields and has significant practical value. Let me give an example here. When a species of Dioscorea, wild yam, was discovered to possess steroid compounds, investigation of other closely related species revealed even greater quantities of these compounds. Systematics can also help in developing further the economic resources that we already have. The biological control of agricultural pests, it essentially requires proper identification of the organisms, plus the data on their ecology and reproduction. Also, proper identification of plant material is important in customs as well as in forensic application. The proper use of land resources such as building of new dams, canals is another area in which systematists play a crucial role by suggesting on possible ecological impacts. Additionally, the knowledge gained by systematists through study of relationships of wild species can be used to improve our existing cultivated food crops by various cytogenetics and molecular methods. Gathering of data on indigenous use of plants can also yield valuable economic returns. Finally, if we see, the motivation for many in the field of plant systematics has been the joy of exploring incredible diversity of life. Because most of the human beings are amazed with the aesthetics of their environment and natural landscape. This relates to a hypothesis called as biophilia, that is our natural bond with other biological species. In the end, we can also say that we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are being taught. So dear students, in today's introductory lecture on massive online open course on plant systematics, we had discussion on historical perspective of plant systematics. We also highlighted the various principles of plant systematics, and then various components of plant systematics, and also the phases of plant systematics. And lastly, we also highlighted the contributions of plant systematics to biology in particular and human society in general. I hope you have enjoyed today's introductory lecture. Hope you will enjoy other lectures in this massive open online course on plant systematics. With this, I will take a leave for today. Bye-bye.